The topics and opinions expressed on the following show are solely those of the hosts and their guests and not those of W4WN Radio, its employees, or affiliates. We make no recommendations or endorsements for radio show programs, services, or products mentioned on air or on our web. No liability, explicit or implied, shall be extended to W4WN Radio, its employees, or affiliates. Any questions or comments should be directed to those show hosts. Thank you for choosing W4WN Radio.
This is Beyond Confidence with your host, Divya Parekh. Do you want to live a more fulfilling life? Do you want to live your legacy and achieve your personal, professional, and financial goals? Well, coming up on Divya Parekh's Beyond Confidence, you will hear real stories of leaders, entrepreneurs, and achievers who have stepped into discomfort, shattered their status quo, and are living the life they want. You will learn how relationships are the key to achieving your aspirations and financial goals. Moving your career or business forward does not have to happen at the expense of your personal or family life, or vice versa. Learn more at www.divyaparekh.com, and you can connect with Divya at contact@divyaparekh.com. This is Beyond Confidence, and now here's your host, Divya Parekh.
Good morning, listeners. This is Divya, and I'm thrilled to be here with you all as always, because you guys are the best. So, folks, today we are going to be having a very interesting conversation. I just wanted to share for those of you who have got our books, very thankful to you because partial profits from our books go to kiva.org. We are helping people in global entrepreneurship, and also, as I always invite you, give that 1 hour of time every month without any strings attached to people. So, all right, let's bring in Dinah. Welcome, Dinah.
Thank you. Great to be here, Divya.
It is wonderful to have you. So let's begin in the beginning as to share with us, how did your childhood go?
Well, I think one of the great things about my childhood was we grew up in nature. We had a meadow behind our yard. We could play with caterpillars and frogs. I remember digging in the dirt and climbing trees. And I think all of that really grounded us as kids, and in our neighborhood. We learned common sense. We learned how to interact with our real world. And, today I think kids are pulled into a lot of screens, right? They're on their phones and iPads and tablets. And I certainly hope that they also experience the world, because I think that's just such a great way to grow up when you're grounded in nature.
It sure is. So today, folks, Dinah actually, she's an award-winning speaker, author, and international virtual trainer who brings over 25 years of experience. And she has trained Fortune 100 and 500 companies virtually in more than a dozen countries. So we started out with your childhood, and what a wonderful childhood, because I recall climbing trees and enjoying my tree house, even though it was a bare minimum, but still a lot of fun with that.
Right.
So share with us, as you grew up, how did your journey transpire?
Well, I think the significant time in my childhood that I remember the most was a move. And, a lot of military families, they're moving all the time, and those kids are always adapting. For me, it was one move, but even that was enough to be so memorable, because you leave behind everything your home, your community, your school, your friends, and you move to a new community and you start all over. And I was 10 years old, and I remember going to my new class in the middle of the year. It was March, and the teacher that I had loved math. So she did math all morning with her students. And by the time I moved there, they were done with their math book. They were so accelerated because she loved math and accelerated them. So I was so behind, because at my school, we were still in the math book. So my father worked with me every night. He sat there, I did the work, but he supported me, and I just had to work through that math. And after 2-3 months, he asked my teacher, how is she doing? And she said, she's at the top of the class. class. But it just was a huge obstacle, and I just had to apply myself. But I had the great support, right, of my parents who helped me through that.
And that's wonderful. And as you grew, how did you get into the training area?
Well, I developed this love for learning, which comes from my parents and my father as well. And I also really enjoyed presenting and speaking. And I also was really attracted to business. I love doing internships in the summers. And so when you put all of those together, learning, business, and presenting and training was just sort of the natural trajectory for all of those three things. So I really enjoy helping people learn and grow. And that's exactly what training does.
Of course, training, coaching, consulting, these are such powerful things because you are an element, you're the guide on the side.
Yes.
Help other people, and it's being a coach, facilitator, consultant myself, I know how joyful it is and how rewarding it is.
It's so rewarding. Yes, absolutely.
So let me kind of go back a little bit. So even in 90s, we used to have phone conferences, and then we would even have video conferences, but they were of course not as prevalent. Now with the advent of pandemic and hybrid work styles, Zoom is so much in demand. And I'm sure, there's so many questions we are going to go through that I'm going to jump straight into it. How did you move from training in person to becoming an expert on Zoom?
Well, we actually did training on video conferencing platforms in the late 1990s is when those platforms started to emerge. I started getting into it in about early 2000s. So there were some tools back then that actually don't exist anymore, but we had the video conferencing platforms back then that we did use for training. We called it web conferencing. So we did have video capability, but we didn't use it very much because it was poor quality, low bandwidth. It was just a little image in the top left. And we had a lot of the tools that many of our listeners are familiar with Zoom. You could still do breakouts, but you had to do it through the audio only through a landline phone. And we could do annotations and a lot of those different interactive tools that we have today in Zoom. So we've seen the evolution over these last 2 decades. It's been very exciting for me to see how everything has really expedited. But then with the pandemic, the whole world, right, was suddenly introduced to this brand new way of communicating. So it's been really exciting to see that evolution.
Absolutely. And what led you to just focusing on Zoom itself? I mean, of course, as you shared that the whole world has moved to Zoom and people are going back to in person because mental health has taken a really huge beating. Because I can share that coming from a neuroscience background and coaching corporate executives, I have seen from top down to incoming Z generation the impact it has had. So, in the frame that we have, share with us as to how did you start putting the pieces together and what are some key pieces that
Yeah.
anybody, there's so many corporate professionals, so many times people are sitting in the t-shirt, even if they have the camera off, and the lighting can be an issue. So, for example, today I'm traveling, so of course I don't have my usual lighting where it's nice and warm. That said, so just dig into the details.
Yeah. So there's so many things we can do to really project and build our confidence, as your podcast title, implies, beyond confidence. So what can we do to look and be powerful on camera? So I have a really catchy mnemonic, Divya, to help our listeners remember kind of the key elements when you are on camera and you're working on a video conferencing platform like Zoom. And that acronym is BLEACH. And so the phrase is if you use bleach to clean up your on-camera image. So B stands for things that we need to talk about with the background. L is for lighting. As you mentioned, Divya, you're traveling and on the road, but you're already thinking about lighting, which is fantastic. E is for expressions. A is for angle. C is for clothing. And H is for headroom. So a lot to unpack there.
Well, Let's go for it.
Let's jump in. So starting with B as background, it's really about focusing the attention on you and your message. So if your background competes with you, if there are distracting elements, for example, things that move in the background, if you have a virtual backdrop with clouds moving across the sky, movement is novel, it catches our attention, and it turns our focus away from you and your message. So really you want to declutter, you want to tidy, you want to remove anything that's distracting, and keep a clean presence and background. As you have even in traveling, Divya, you've definitely have a beautiful backdrop there, very simple and elegant. And I think what listeners need to remember too is we can move things out of the frame of the camera. It may stay in our room, but really we just want whatever is on camera is what matters. So everything in the frame sends a message and gets our attention. So that's the B.
No, definitely. And as you're sharing, so as I'm traveling, I will be doing a couple of live shows while being outside. So I already kind of picked out that where I'm going to be. And sometimes you cannot have everything and you do the best you can.
You do the best
So
you
you
can.
talked about the frame, and that is so important. So sometimes, some people will say that, be in the middle of a frame, break up the frame, consider it as two diagonals. So if you could share with our listeners as to how does the framing can help?
Yeah, well, the importance of the frame is, let's transport ourselves to a museum. And let's say we see a Monet piece of art on the wall. The frame around that artwork is a boundary. And that boundary tells us subconsciously, everything in this frame, pay attention to it. So it's sort of a natural closure or parameter, right? So the same thing happens online visually. We have this frame. It could be a 3-inch box, right? But the border tells viewers, tells people to pay attention to everything in it. And that's why we have to pay attention to everything in it so it doesn't cause that distraction. Zoom and other platforms also have these other modes called immersive view, or Microsoft Teams, for example, calls it together mode, where sometimes you can project various individuals, right, into a shared virtual space. And that is usually a still shared space. It merges us together. And again, we want the focus to be on us, right, as people and our message. So again, the bottom line is make sure it's not distracting in your background.
Absolutely. And that makes perfect sense because as it is, our attention span is less than that of a goldfish. So given that, it doesn't help us having more distracting things going in the background. So we've talked about B.
Mm-hmm.
Is there anything else you want to touch upon before we move on to L?
Yeah, we can move on to L for sure. And as you mentioned, Divya, before about lighting, I'm so glad that you're thinking about that. I hope our listeners are thinking about it. The main thing to remember is we want to light from the front, not from the back. If we light from the back, for example, you have a window behind you, it will cast you in shadow, cast you in silhouette. And viewers want to be able to see your face, your eyes, your mouth. That's how we communicate. That's how we learned language. And so we want to have even lighting as well. You don't want to have half of your face in shadow. And so that requires sort of lights on either side of your device from the front. And sometimes you might have a window with natural daylight to the side, which is okay. But just to make sure the other side is also lit of your face so that you have that even lighting. And then soft light too. So sometimes in the afternoon, that sun can come in really bright. And you can have harsh light. Maybe our listeners have seen that, Divya. Maybe you've seen that where it looks like a halo on somebody or just really hot spots. So we want to soften, diffuse that light with a soft light bulb or close that shade. So again, we're going for soft, even lighting.
Absolutely. So before I used to hop on Zoom, Zoom used to be more of a means to have conversations, relaxed conversations. And as I started learning about this, I had recorded a video with not much idea about light. I come from science background and entrepreneurial. You don't think about light and all that. And then I'm looking at the video and those like, they're like, my face looks washed out. And they're like, almost like my cheeks are shining. It's like
Yeah.
reflectors on the road. I'm like, what the heck? So I totally get what you're saying. And
Yeah.
folks, it's okay. All of us kind of go through it. And especially with people with glasses. Another thing
Yeah.
to kind of keep in mind is that the reflecting, some of it will reflect. So it's a
Mhm.
balance that you got to do. Now,
Yes.
as we're talking about lighting, do you have any idea about, especially for women and even for men, like men have become open to, like in terms of any makeup or any mild thing what people could do?
I really sort of support people feeling good in their own bodies, right? And so if you want to use makeup, go for it. And if you don't. I think you should be you and you should be natural. So that's good. But it is interesting to note that if you have good lighting, it actually hides your wrinkles and you look younger on Zoom. So if you light yourself well, you will watch those wrinkles disappear. Now, Zoom also has, if some of you have played around with these tools, enhancements, which I think as the years go on, we're going to see more and more of this, where you can actually apply Zoom lipstick. Gentlemen can add a goatee. You've probably seen that. It can improve your image. You can do a little slider. And what it does is it sort of gives you that sort of sheen look. And then it again removes wrinkles. But you do want to be you is what I like to recommend. One thing I would caution about those ring lights is sometimes the ring lights can reflect in your glasses and look like little donuts. I don't know if you've seen that before. So being careful of that. But I love what you did, Divya, that you watched yourself on video. And most people don't like to do that. But it is the best way to see yourself as your viewers see you or as others see you. And then you can, as you did, assess what can be improved and what can I do to change this and make it better.
Absolutely. And one of the things I'm sure we'll kind of get into the audio portion. So one of the things I had done, I had used a microphone and then listened to myself, didn't sound good. Used the camera microphone, didn't work because I've got Logitech. Not only I've got a good computer camera, and yet you don't get that crisp look.
Right?
So try different things, and it also matters, like how far you are from it. So I'll let you kind of, before we jump on to E, would you like to share anything about audio?
Yes, absolutely. I think the most important thing for our listeners to know is that it actually usually isn't a good idea to use your built-in microphone in your device. You can sound echoey, it can sound tinny, you can sound like you're a distance away or you're in a cave. So the best thing to do is invest in an external microphone or a headset. We're finding that wireless devices sometimes can be a bit sketchy. They can create, I was on a call yesterday where it was creating some buzz for people. So sometimes wiring in can be better, at least when you're interacting in the Zoom platform or with video conferencing technologies. But definitely try out your external microphones or your headsets because the circuitry is different in every device. And what might work great for Divya on her device doesn't work great for me, and vice versa. So, because of the circuitry differences, definitely test it out.
And for somebody who's starting out, can you give us like basic advice, like what type of microphone with a general computer,
Yeah.
or
Absolutely. To keep it very simple, just a USB microphone. So, for example, there are so many different affordable ones, even on Amazon or that you can buy online. But USB, so you just plug them into your particular device. You can go all the way up to $100 or more, or you can find a good mic for $30 on Amazon. So there are a lot of options for you. And again, just making sure you try it out on your device and have a trusted confidant get on the other end of a video conferencing call and test it out and make sure that your audio is good, because good audio is even more important than good video. We really need to be able to hear that crystal clear audio.
I definitely agree. And when you talk about the price range, it is so true. One of my first microphones back in 1990s when we used to have web conferences, I had invested in that. It was from a Best Buy. $40, and it lasted me almost 13, 14 years. And I
Wow.
cannot find something like it again. It made it canceled the background noise. Oh my goodness. And I can't find it anywhere. Okay, so
That's
that's
true, and it's true for headsets too, where you pay maybe $30 and your headset lasts a decade or so, right? So, it's so true, yeah.
so we have covered B and L. Tell us more about E.
So E is kind of those nonverbals. So this is expressions. This is animation on your face. It's eye contact. It's body movement. It's hand gestures. So, hand gestures are so great. They amplify, they exaggerate, they help communicate what we do. If we think about when your listeners are in a noisy restaurant or you are, Divya, and you're trying to communicate and say three, you might just raise your hand and point out three fingers, right? They sort of amplify what we're saying. So the same is true on Zoom. You still want to use your gestures when you can, but you just have to make sure you frame yourself so that they can be seen. But we move slower on Zoom. So because the gestures get blurred. If we move really fast as we would do in person, it it doesn't work as well because it blurs everything and it becomes distracting. So we slow movement. We also don't move toward camera because when we move toward camera, everything grows gigantic. So we don't lean in toward camera. We don't move front to back on camera. You actually stay where you are. You can do slight movement changes side to side, but we don't grow gigantic and move toward camera because it becomes, super distracting. Eye contact is another really important thing. So we connect through the camera lens. And though it may feel like it's cold and impersonal, I see so many professionals who they're presenting even on Zoom, or maybe they're in a meeting, leading a meeting, and they're looking. Of course, we do need to look, right? If you're using a whiteboard, if you're checking the chat, if you are looking at your slides or bringing up your slides. But when you can, and when it's really important, make sure you come back to that eye contact with your camera lens, because that's how we connect. And as people and as human beings, it's all about connection. And that eye contact is so essential for building that rapport and establishing those connections.
Mm, so true. And I've got a funny story to add to it. So I had been an opening speaker for a virtual conference probably a year and a half back. And then what I did was I had everything ready for Zoom, everything connected, and they used StreamYard. And what happened was, because it was a completely brand new platform to me, I didn't connect my Logitech camera. So now I'm
Oh,
looking at Logitech camera. I'm their opening speaker. And
oh,
for
it was different.
an hour, I'm looking.
Oh no.
And then, I was able to
Yeah,
see the replay like after I was done. And I'm like, oh my
right,
God. And then it
right.
was good that there was a Facebook group where the attendees were there. And I said that this is what happened. And attendees were so kind. So
Yeah,
sometimes it's important to own up your mistakes, and things happen,
absolutely.
folks. So rather than beating yourself up, because I was I was on vacation and before the opportunity came, so I did not want to like cancel my vacation. So I had pillows and I had pulled the patio furniture inside. I had created this whole wonderful thing where the lighting was coming on my face and already. So sometimes know that you may have the best intentions, best everything, and yet things can go south, and it's okay.
Yeah,
It, actually,
there is grace. And we saw so much grace during the pandemic, and there needed to be grace during the pandemic. I had colleagues that were working from their laundry room, their kitchen table, their bedroom. We all did, right? And so it was okay because we needed that grace. And now as we sort of settle back into sort of hybrid workplaces, some of us work from home, some of us do a combination. We are looking at more establishing more professional, permanent sort of spaces from wherever we are, working and broadcasting. But yes, absolutely, there's still grace.
Absolutely, no. It's and one of the things I love is that it makes for the best stories ever. I mean, of course, I was
Yeah,
embarrassed the heck, it embarrassed the heck out of me that day.
right.
And I was like thinking, oh my God, how could I do this? And just the whole
Yeah.
like, you know what? This is going to be the best story ever for the rest of my life.
That's a great way to think about it. And the audience is like, we're over here. We're over here. Look at us. I saw
Yep,
I
yep.
saw a news anchor the other day who must have looked at the wrong camera as well. And so, we're watching her and she's looking down and we sort of feel like we're over here. Like, yeah, you feel that sort of gap.
And so, yeah, some funny stories here. What does the A bring for
So
us?
the A is angle. So this is one of my favorites. So what people will do is they'll use their laptop and they'll set their laptop lower than them. So right, it might be on a desk. Some people put it on their lap, which be careful of that because that can be a shaky camera. We want a steady cam. But what happens is it looks like the person is hovering over you. They are bigger than you, they're looming over you, and there's this sort of intimidating posture. From the viewer on the other side, it looks like you are bigger and looking down and looming at me, which is that sort of intimidating perspective, but it also isn't very flattering on the other person's end, right? So we call that sort of the double chin angle, or some people call it the nose pose. I heard someone at a conference last week in Orlando call it the nose pose. And so it's not a great position. So we all know that to build rapport, to build credibility, if we're all on an even playing field, right? That helps. So we want to elevate that device, or whether that's raising your chair, putting something under the laptop, whatever it is, so that you kind of have that camera lens close to your hairline so that it looks like you are at eye level with your peers on Zoom is a better way to build credibility.
Absolutely. And I've got so many stories. I love
You
stories.
have more stories, yeah.
Having written, several books, I'm all about storytelling. So
Yeah.
recently I had a brand new client and he was calling from his phone. And the way the phone was angled, bless his heart, not only his double chin was showing, and folks, don't get me wrong, I've got a double chin as well.
Yeah, me too.
And I've got a belly too. And it was just so close to him that I'm just seeing like everywhere, like a huge belly. I don't even see his face.
Oh,
And
right.
I
Right.
said, I
I
said,
heard about it. I heard about a job interview where the individual did well, but then at the end of the interview, he said goodbye and then he kind of closed his laptop halfway and then the camera was focused just on his belly. And so the panel was like, "Oh, like we're just looking at your stomach." And so it's what I call camera awareness. You're
Mhm.
just aware. You bring this awareness to what am I projecting at the time that I'm on camera? And if I'm not on camera, turn off your camera. For example, in training, when somebody turns on their camera and they're the trainer or the instructor, and then they walk away to go get a beverage, what's the experience your learners are going to have? They're going to come and they're going to see an empty chair. And is that how we want to welcome them to an exciting, learning, engaging experience? No. So turn off that camera if you're not there. So things like that, but camera awareness.
Absolutely. Very fantastic. What about C and H?
So C is clothing. So as you're wearing that beautiful sort of heather lavender today, for those who are just listening, um, solid colors work best on camera. Now, if you are just having a meeting with somebody on Zoom, or you're just in a meeting conference, whatever you want to wear is fine, as long as we dress professional on top, right? The bottom, you can wear whatever you want on the bottom, but we dress professional on top. So you can wear what you want, but when you're presenting, when you're leading, when it's a really important Zoom communication that you're involved in, solid colors will help you pop. So those greens and those blues and even browns and tans. When you wear wavy or thin lines in your clothes, that can create a wavy shimmer on camera. So we kind of stay away from that. And really just making sure, again, that you pop as the professional who's speaking.
Definitely. It makes sense. And actually, I was on one of conferences where I was speaking, and it was around how to get your voice out there, how to create executive presence. So I purposefully wore a very busy top, and I
Oh,
shared with in my presentation that look how distracting it is, and this is
oh,
the very thing that you want to avoid. So sometimes you can come across as different ways and get people to focus differently, but definitely I agree with you to where, and I've done it, folks, like in my initial days, I'm very like, oh, nice, very bright
yeah,
colors. I was like, oh, I love this. It's summertime, springtime. Let's
yeah.
bring all the florals out. And then one of somebody had told me, I think it was early 2000s, Divya, that's so distracting. Can you wear a solid color, please? And I'd be like, okay. So it's interesting. See, folks, that's why, we brought Dinah over here so you don't make all the mistakes I've made.
Yeah. Well, it's you make a great point of view about learning what not to do too. So, when you do wear something distracting, people experience it and you see how it calls attention away from. So it's all about focus, almost focus, directing focus and where we want it to be, right? Which is on your message and on what
Hmm.
you have to say. Mhm.
And then H.
All right, so H is the last one. And this is it's about framing as well, but H stands for headroom. So a lot of times I'll see somebody on camera where maybe their head will be in the far right-hand corner, and then there's all this real estate above them that's just empty space. It's headroom, right? We want to leverage the frame and maximize as much of it as we can, which means we want to see you. So I tell people to use a three-finger rule, which means from the top of your hair, if you put three fingers, laying them horizontally above your head, that's about the small margin of space that you need. And then centering yourself in the frame. So we're not far off to the right or left. We're not way down. And then you're not leveraging all the real estate you have within your on camera frame. And then we're better able to see you. Plus, we also, as we talked about with B and background and distractions, some people will have a ceiling fan in their room. And sometimes it looks like it's right on their head, like they're wearing a beanie. And what's worse is the fan will be spinning, it'll be on. And that really calls attention to yourself, right? So, if that is you, because I certainly have that situation in our home as well, where when you stand in a certain position, the fan is right there. So you just can maybe shift yourself or maybe use a different room or use a different angle on your device so that we don't have the spinning fan, and then you do have that small margin of headroom above yourself in the frame.
Well, we have covered quite a bit. Thank you, Diana. Let's say, like, there's so many entrepreneurs and corporate professionals, whether they are working as corporate professionals or whether you are as an entrepreneur, you are delivering classes, delivering presentations. So do you have any tips around presentations? Because when you're presenting, then you have this tiny little box either on the left or right as to, keep the slides, continue for sharing or stop sharing and come back. Is that distracting? So any best practices around that would be awesome.
Yeah, that's a great question. And I know many of us have been doing that during the pandemic and will continue doing that. And so there are a couple things to keep in mind. If you have a completely virtual audience and you also are virtual, that's one thing. And then if you have a hybrid presentation, right, where either you're in person or virtual, or they're in person or virtual, it's the combination of both. I call that live mixed. That's a whole different situation. But let's focus on the virtual first. So, one of the things to think about is there are times when it does make sense to optimize yourself being on camera. You're introducing yourself. You're giving folks a sense of your person and place and who you are and what you look like so they can recognize you. So when you first start, definitely I would recommend being on camera for a virtual presentation. But as you begin to share slides, for example, you want to think about directing focus. So when you have a very complex slide, for example, and there's a lot of complexity that needs people's attention, I would suggest it's okay to go off camera, direct focus to the diagram. Your virtual commentary will still supplement and narrate what you're saying. The focus is shifted, right? Because there's so many things that can be distracting to that visual. You can use live annotation. A lot of the tools, Zoom being one, and many of the other tools in the industry also allow this, where you can circle, highlight, tell us where to focus as you're talking about that particular item on your slide. And you can do what I call progressive builds, where as you talk about different elements in your visuals, they will appear through animation. So you're progressively building your slide as you go. But all of those ways, do you see what we're doing? We're directing focus at the time and at the place of where it needs to be. And all of that helps with learner and audience attention.
Mm-hmm. No, definitely some great points over there. So, Dinah, there are a lot of master classes and webinars. I mean, sometimes webinars could be a thing of the past, and yet there are quite a few prevalent that's kind of going on in both the corporate world as well as entrepreneurial online marketing world. How would you say that webinars are very engaging? Like you mentioned that, you can go off camera. What could people do during webinars itself as they're delivering their message? A little bit of annotations, a little bit of nuance, like pause. If you have any tips, that'll be great around that.
Yeah, I actually have a phrase, I call it announced silence, where what it is normally when people are silent, presenters, let's say, are silent, we think something went wrong. A lot of times, I had a colleague tell me last week that when she paused for just a few seconds, she got all these comments in chat like, "Oh, my audio dropped," or "Your audio dropped," or "We lost your connection." And she said, "I would just pause." So sometimes what I like to tell people is announce your pause. So I'm going to be silent for 30 seconds while you study this diagram, or I'm going to be silent for the next minute or so, and I'd like you to do a reflection on XYZ. And so you're letting your virtual learners know it's okay to pause. I am pausing. There is no audio drop. But when you think about nature, right, we have light and dark, we have play and work, we have all these polarities in our world. Well, we have speaking and we have sort of pausing, and pausing is a part of communication. So weaving that stillness in, taking that time to process, digest, and reflect is actually going to be helpful and a win-win for both presenter and the recipients on the other end of that webinar.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Definitely some great nuggets over there. So now listeners may be thinking, how can they connect with you and how can you help them?
Yeah, so they are welcome to find me on our website. Our website is www.howellesassociates.com. So that's HOWLES as in Sam, associates plural.com. And we do consulting and coaching and offer classes and virtual training, as well as virtual meetings, how to do those effectively, and virtual presentations as well.
Well, lovely. So you brought out one more element that we didn't touch upon, virtual meetings. What, if any, few best practices around virtual meetings?
Well, there are a lot of tips there with virtual meetings, and that is something, right, that we are definitely steeped in, and it's here to stay for sure. But I think one thing to think about with virtual meetings is really helping people warm up, because there's this tendency to go on mute, and it almost gives you permission to disengage right? So what I like to do when we have the smaller meetings, not like a big division meeting, for example, but those smaller meetings, encourage people to not mute themselves, give them a warm-up activity like, hey, everyone, how's your day going? We hear from everybody. Because once you speak out loud, you are more likely to do it again. Almost like once you submit a chat post, you're more likely to do it again. So really getting people over that inertia and helping them warm up. So we do like this just brief icebreaker. And then you're more likely to get that engaged discussions. But of course, it's very important for a virtual facilitator to also ask those open-ended questions. Divya, I haven't heard from you yet. What do you think about this? Right? So reach out and make sure you're bringing people in. I've experienced very productive virtual meetings. I'm sure some of our listeners have as well. So really that skill of facilitation. When we bring in the hybrid element though, right? So some people in the meeting are online and some people are in room. Very important for the in-room folks to not start the meeting until all the virtual attendees are there. It's so easy for them to get that energy going in room and they start chatting and sometimes zip right into the business of the day. And then the virtual folks are just dropping in. We start to see them on the screen, but they just missed what you talked about. So it's that discipline of waiting till we're all here, controlling those side conversations, and then really what I call making the invisible audible, which means you speak something out loud. Because, for example, Divya, let's say that we had listeners joining us in this meeting, and it looks like I am disagreeing with you, but actually, I'm just trying to speak. And so, non-verbally, it can be misconstrued what the message really is. So, better for me to say, I have a question about that, and just verbally speak it to clarify to everyone what the intention is.
Oh, so powerful, definitely. Now, you mentioned about something really, really well that ask people that, hey, I haven't heard from you. What do you think about it? Now, so many times, some of the complaints that I've heard from some of my clients is that people will just turn off the camera. They'll not even come on camera. And now you're having this group meeting and trying to get people's thoughts. How can you encourage people to show up?
Yeah, what do you do? So that's a wonderful question. So one of the things you can do is I really try to prep people. So if you have a very important meeting, you really want people to be on camera, I would in that invitation, and make sure you have an agenda that you send out ahead of time, let people know in that invite, please be camera ready. Please be camera ready. So they know ahead of time. And a lot of times from a Florida State University study that I looked at on webcams, people will tidy their environment and groom themselves. And that's something that they need to know beforehand, right? But then once the meeting happens, if there are individuals who choose not to be on camera, we never force them to be on camera. We strongly encourage, but we don't force them because we don't know. Maybe they were up all night with a sick child. Maybe they're not feeling well. Maybe they had a deadline and they had to work on it all night, right? So all of that we don't know about, but we strongly encourage it. So if they do choose to remain off camera, we still remember to include, definitely include them, call them their names, Joe, tell me more about that. Or Bob, what do you think about this? You've had experience in this. Really working to get everyone to participate as a skilled facilitator.
Absolutely, very powerful. So, Dana, would you like to share any last thoughts with our listeners?
Well, I do have a book that is coming out next week. The book is called Next Level Virtual Training, Advance Your Facilitation. And we have a whole chapter dedicated to on-camera competence. So it talks about all of the things that we sort of dove into today with the BLEACH acronym and how to clean up your on-camera image. So feel free to check it out. It's available on Amazon, and it's by ATD Press.
Well, fantastic. Congratulations on your upcoming book. And
thank you.
Thank you for being so generous with sharing your knowledge. Really
Thank you,
enjoyed our
Divya.
conversation.
Great to be here. Thanks again for having me.
My pleasure. And listeners, thank you for joining us, because without you, the show would not be possible. And reach out to us as to what areas of your life we can be of support, because I have always enjoyed your communication, your reaching out to me and sharing, and that's what helps us direct the course of this show. So thank you for that and continuing support. And thank you, Jason, for making it technically possible. So, folks, be well and take care until next time.
Thank you for being part of Beyond Confidence with your host, Divya Parekh. We hope you have learned more about how to start living the life you want. Each week on Beyond Confidence, you hear stories of real people who have experienced growth by overcoming their fears and building meaningful relationships. During Beyond Confidence, Divya Parekh shares what happened to her when she stepped out of her comfort zone to work directly with people across the globe. She not only coaches people how to form heart connections, but also transform relationships to mutually beneficial partnerships as they strive to live the life they want. If you are ready to live the life you want and leverage your strengths, learn more at www.divyaparekh.com. And you can connect with Divya at contact@divyaparekh.com. We look forward to you joining us next week.